Hey, it's Jason Falls of the Marketing Podcast Network. You know we're trying to bring you the greatest education opportunities out there. We've got another one for you, folks. The Creator Economy Expo, CEX 2023, is for content creators and entrepreneurs interested in building and growing their content-first businesses without relying on social platforms. This year's Creator Economy Expo features 10 amazing keynote speakers and over 30 in-depth breakout sessions. Join 500-plus bloggers, podcasters, authors, newsletter writers, speakers, coaches, and consultants, and freelancers at the learning and networking event for content creators. Don't be left out. Plan to attend this year, May 1st through the 3rd, 2023 in Cleveland, Ohio. Register now and get early bird pricing, and the Marketing Podcast Network has a special offer for you. You can get $100 off using the coupon code MPN100. That's MPN100. Head over to cex.events to register. cex.events, code MPN100. Hey there, it's Jason with the Marketing Podcast Network. Real quick, I want to make sure you know that the world's leading B2B Marketing Expo is returning to the Los Angeles Convention Center on March 21st and 22nd. It's high time we got back together to learn, see the latest technologies and solutions, and network, right? Join thousands of marketing professionals just like you to learn from over 250 industry expert speakers, educational masterclasses, and over 300 exhibitors. And this year, your ticket also gets you into the Sales Innovation Expo and the Marketing and Advertising Expo. So it's like 3 conferences in one. It's March 21st and 22nd at the Los Angeles Convention Center. Go to b2bmarketingexpo.us to register. That's b2bmarketingexpo.us. The Marketing Podcast Network is a proud partner of the B2B Marketing Expo for 2023. We'll see you in LA.
Welcome to The Art of Sway. This is a podcast that brings you inside the world of marketing through the lens of influence. I'm your host, Danielle Wiley. Each week, through candid conversations with industry insiders, we will uncover how influencer marketing is making an impact across all consumer buying habits and is changing the way we talk to each other. Let's dive in. I love talking to Phoebe. It was especially interesting to hear about her journey from growing up on a horse farm with no Wi-Fi to now covering social media in New York City, of all places. We also talked about what it's like to cover an ever-changing industry and some of the articles she's written over the past year that really stuck with her and were her faves. So I hope you enjoy. Phoebe Bain founded Marketing Brew, a morning brew vertical covering the most important news in the marketing industry in 2020. In 2021, the vertical expanded into original reporting and beyond the newsletter, adding many more reporters and an editor to the fold. Before rolling out Marketing Brew, Phoebe wrote for Social Media Today under Industry Dive and worked on the social media desk for Business Insider. So Phoebe, hi, it's so good to have you. I feel like we're like best friends. This is the 3rd time I've talked to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on.
Of course, of course. So we've been talking on the phone and on Twitter for probably a year now about all things social media. And we met for the first time, was it last week or 2 weeks ago in New York City for coffee, which was super fun to put. I mean, I had seen your face, but to put like an actual being to the name.
Yes.
And get to know each other.
To put a 3D body to the name was wonderful.
Yes. So I thought it would be interesting. I loved hearing about your unique childhood. It's such a sharp contrast from what you do now. So I thought maybe it would be fun if you could share a little bit about your very like offline growing up environment, which again, it's like kind of ironic given how what you cover now is social media all the time. And well, I'll let you tell everyone how different that is from how you were raised.
Incredibly offline. I mean, I remember like going to school and when the kids were getting into Vine, because everybody at that point had iPhones, like late in my high school experience, and everyone had a Vine account and everyone was making Vines of each other, and I had a flip phone. And I was like, this app is stupid, you know, it's reducing people's attention spans, it's all just going to make us dumber, but I think I just wanted an iPhone.
Yeah.
But yeah, I grew up in Virginia in a town called Middleburg. It's like an hour west of DC, but it's a town of 400 people. It has one stoplight, and truly just like no infrastructure for technology, kind of on purpose. Like there are groups that, you know, will be very against bringing cell towers in or like any sort of tech infrastructure. There's a Facebook group for like the local townspeople. And it's funny because people during the pandemic who were looking to move out of the city sort of found out about this town for the first time, and a lot of people moved out here and more tourists came, and you'll see people in the Facebook group now being like, how do you get Wi-Fi to your house? And you like kind of can't. You can barely, you know, you can get something that's barely functioning, but like not like it is in the city at all. I live in New York City now, but yeah, town of 400 people, super small, and I grew up riding horses, and so you know, there wasn't necessarily a need for like a video game station or cable TV most of the time because there was a pony in the backyard.
Yeah.
So that's kind of all the entertainment you need when you're a horse crazy little girl. But yeah, truly not a high tech upbringing for sure.
And so so you left town to go away to college. I think you said you ended up at William and Mary.
I did. Yeah, I'm holding a William and Mary mug right now. But
perfect.
Yeah, it was wonderful.
And so how did you end up this childhood living with no Wi-Fi and the flip phone and riding horses, and now you're living in New York City and writing about social media? Like, how did that journey kind of unfold?
So my mom is originally from New York and kind of was the black sheep of her family that wanted to leave the area. She grew up riding horses, and this is just kind of what brings people to the town. It's like a very horsey town. So that's how we ended up here. But I went to New York every Christmas, and my mom tells a story where I like got off the train at Grand Central at all of 4 years old and looked around and was like, I'm going to live here one day. And she was like, you haven't even been outside yet. But yeah, so I kind of always knew I wanted to be in New York, and truly writing is like kind of the only thing I'm good at. Like I remember taking standardized testing in school, and like the math part was like abysmal and the writing part was like as high as you could score. So I knew I would be some sort of writer. You know, debated being a lawyer for a while and dated some law students in college and kind of saw their lives and was like, that doesn't look like a ton of fun. So when I was in college, there was like this legacy student newspaper called The Flat Hat, which is like one of the older student newspapers in the country. And it was like around, you know, when everybody was being laid off from like the .com boom and bust. And I was like, oh, well, I'm not going to work in print. Like print is dead, right? That was the idea, is that like all, you know, Gawker was big. All these online blogs were sort of the new thing. Yeah. And even if people were getting laid off, I was like, well, you know, I absolutely can't work in print. And the Flat Hat didn't really have that much of a digital presence. So I found this online program called College Magazine, which if there's any like younger journalists out there listening that are in college, it's an amazing program. I think it still exists. It's been forever. But yeah, they were essentially like this online sort of her campus type publication. And when I joined, they were working on starting campus chapters. So previously it was like, you know, you blog about college life, you write about college life, whatever, but you have maybe your editor is at NYU if you're at William and Mary, or if you're an editor, maybe, you know, your people are at like UCLA, your writers, but they were starting to develop campus chapters. So I founded the second ever College Magazine campus chapter at William and Mary and was, you know, the lead editor there, had a bunch of writers and just really enjoyed it. And they, like in the College Magazine database, once you became an editor, you had access to this Excel sheet, I think it was. And so there was an Excel sheet of like every past College Magazine alumni and, you know, all of their contact information and where they were working now. And like, you know, a lot of these people were working at just significant publications and had gone on to do great things. So long story short, I got an internship. I really like barely did school. Like I was like barely passing college because I was always doing journalism stuff, but I graduated, and my senior year truly like barely did any classes and did an internship at Social Media Today, which is under Industry Dive. And after I graduated school, they kind of let me go full-time freelance. So I was mostly freelance editing, just, you know, contributor articles that were about the business of social media marketing, that type of thing. And I did that like at night mostly. And in the daytime, I moved to New York like a week after I graduated and was working at Business Insider on their social media desk. And then, yeah, I, you know, got in touch with Alex and Austin at Morning Brew. And, you know, it was like early days of their company. They'd just been on on Forbes 30 Under 30. And that was like the only reason that I knew them. I'd heard of Morning Brew. Some friends read it on the subway on the way to work, but it was like 15 people at the time. And yeah, they ended up starting Emerging Tech Brew, which was their first business to business publication, and then Retail Brew, which was their second one. And they brought me on to start Marketing Brew, being that I had like a background editing and writing about social media marketing. So yeah, Marketing Brew under Morning Brew. I started in April 2020. I've been there for almost 3 years now. And I think when I joined the company was like 30 people. It's now 300. Wow. And I'm actually the most tenured employee on the B2B side of the team because the people that started retail and emerging tech have since left. And we've built out this like enormous business to business, business news reporting arm of the newsroom. I want to say there's like 50 or 60 people on this side of the newsroom now. And there are many, many more publications. We have HR Brew, we have CFO Brew, all different industries are covered. But Marketing Brew itself, I'm now just one of many reporters for it, which is kind of cool. So there are now 4 of me, and we have an editor and, this whole like dedicated editorial and copy editing and fact checking staff, which is amazing, being that all of Morning Brew was sharing one editor when I first joined, including like the daily newsletter and all that stuff.
That's a lot.
Yeah, I'm one of 5 reporters for Marketing Brew, and being that there are so many of us, I don't have to just like go far and wide and cover the marketing industry at large. I've been able to kind of specialize in a beat, which has been great. So I mostly cover influencer marketing and social media marketing, which is how I ended up here.
Yes. What's your process? Like, how are you? I know when we were chatting a couple of weeks ago in New York, I mentioned something offhand and you were like, ooh, that's an idea, and wrote it down. And then we kind of followed up this week on it. But is that kind of how it works, that you're just always have your ears and eyes open for things going on? Like, what's the process? Because you write a lot of articles and you've actually done some recently. I'm thinking about the one about couples, like TikTok couples who break up and in the middle of a big sponsored initiative and how they handle it. And then you've had a couple that have kind of gotten a lot of pickup and notice. So that's interesting to me too. But first, talk a little bit, I think, about your process and how you are endlessly coming up with fun things to write about.
Yeah, I really just try and always be talking to an expert in the industry, such as yourself. I started this publication I joined Morning Brew to kind of ideate and create it in April 2020, but it rolled out in July 2020. So I had some sources from Social Media Today, people that I'd done Q&As with or old contributors, that type of thing when I was coming into the job. But it really was a lot of source building, like from home. And just as we've rolled into 2022, obviously the pandemic is not over, but it's, changing. And it's really just been so great to finally have the opportunity to meet up with people like yourself in person, because I think that I get the most interesting story ideas just from going to coffee or drinks or whatever with somebody in the city and being like, what's going on with you? What are you seeing? If you were a reporter and not an influencer marketer or a social media marketer, what would you, want reporters to be talking about right now? And typically by asking that, people will, give me 3 or 4 tips or even one good one like you did recently. And I can kind of build a story around there. But yeah, I think that is one of the most important, but also one of the most fun parts of my job is just always making sure that you are talking to the right people. Because, right, like I'm just a dumb journalist. Like I don't have my ear to the ground with this stuff like you guys do. And like if it weren't for people like you who are willing to talk to reporters and, have interesting discussions among all of yourselves about issues in the industry, then I would have nothing. So.
And then you focus very much obviously in the B2B space, but you're covering influencer marketing and influencers are talking to consumers all the time. How much are you interacting with the influencers, and do you interview them at all? Or are you really only covering it from like the agency and brand marketer side?
So mostly the latter, but occasionally there's a story where I need to interview an influencer or many an influencer, just because, you have a living ad unit, right? Like it's not like you're a TV advertising reporter. You can't go and interview like the TV spot that your ad is going to show up in, but these are this is the inventory. Like these people are the ad inventory in this case. So their opinion really matters, right? Like if they aren't willing to post something or be on a certain platform, then obviously influencer marketers will kind of have to follow their lead in some sense, right? The entire creator economy has created this business and they are the creators. So yeah, occasionally I'll have to talk to influencers for a story. The most recent one that I can think of, I forget what the story was on, but it was around Snapchat and kind of whether or not, influencers are interested in using Snapchat for brand deals and whether there's an opportunity for brands to make money on that platform at large. So I had to go and talk to a bunch of different influencers who are on Snapchat and either have used it for brand deals or have not used it for brand deals or have made money off of the platform in some other way, because, you know, those stories are important. Like if an influencer doesn't want to be on a platform or can't figure out how to make money off of a platform, then a brand can't either in terms of the influencer marketing. So yeah, occasionally I talk to influencers, but mostly I'm talking to marketing professionals, experts in influencer marketing.
So I'm so interested in the Snapchat thing because we actually just had a client this week asking us if we thought it would be a good idea to include Snapchat in a program. And I'm not sold on it for influencer marketing. I mean, I really think it's so much more of a communication tool now and an ad venue, like an actual, like highly produced ad versus the more authentic kind of voice that true influencer marketing and sponsored content falls into.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the one avenue where Snapchat can seem interesting, you know, just from what I learned talking to a lot of these creators and working on that story, the people that have Snapchat TV shows, there's actually a former colleague of mine from Business Insider. Her name's Grace Weinstein. She works for The Recount, which is a different, you know, media organization, but like she is a Snapchat TV show. And so people on Snapchat are interested in following her life as a creator, and she posts on there a lot. But I think that unless you have somebody like that who is really like best buds with Snapchat in with them, it doesn't totally make sense, in my opinion, to have, you know, somebody just posting on their Snapchat story for an influencer activation, unless you want to throw it on there in addition to TikTok and Instagram and all of that, right? Like, if
like as a kind of like a plus up.
Yeah, I mean, like there's no reason not to, but there's also, you know, except for these unique creators that have kind of carved out a space for themselves on Snapchat, which is a very small number of people in comparison to those that have done that on places like TikTok and Instagram and, you know, all of the above. But yeah, it's not like there's not a use case for it. It's just not nearly as obvious or common of one as there is on other platforms.
Yeah. What's your favorite platform? And is it different personally and professionally?
Totally different personally and professionally. So Twitter, just for journalists, is really important. You know, that's how I share my stories. That's how I find new sources sometimes just from talking to people on Twitter. I really care about, you know, my Twitter presence and making sure it looks professional but interesting and all of that weird balance and all of the above. But personally, my favorite platform is Tumblr.
That's so much fun. I mean, I remember being at Edelman back in the mid 2000s when Tumblr was just kind of becoming a thing and it was taking over, and we spent so much time talking about it and thinking about it and trying to incorporate it into brand programs. And then it kind of went away. And now all of a sudden I'm hearing Tumblr all the time now.
I think the reason that you're hearing it all the time is, well, okay, first of all, Gen Z, according to Tumblr, right? They're biased, but we can assume they're telling the truth, hopefully. Gen Z is apparently very interested in the app. And, you know, you can tell with the advent of things like Be Real and, you know, Geneva, even like these less structured, I guess, like personal almost platforms where it's not about becoming an influencer, right? It's about whatever those apps want it to be about. Gen Z is really interested in Tumblr, according to Tumblr. So that's part of why you're hearing about it. But also when Elon Musk, you know, when his name first came into the conversation for who was going to buy Twitter, although that has now been an endless saga, a lot of people were like, okay, like if Elon Musk buys Twitter, we're all going to go to Tumblr. And that day, like Tumblr had this huge increase in users. And we know that because Tumblr tweeted about it, which is kind of funny and ironic. But yeah, I think that around when that happened, all of a sudden Tumblr was like in the zeitgeist and in the conversation. But I've spoken to a lot of brands that have had a lot of success in terms of like social media marketing on Tumblr, Manscaped in particular. I think that there's just, you know, a lot of fairly inexpensive inventory and there is a user base there. Like people use it, even if it's not, you know, all of the people. Many people use it. And yeah, I mean, I could send you the article that I wrote about it. It's just pretty much the only thing I've written about Tumblr in the past year. So if you wanted to Google it, Phoebe Bain Tumblr.
I can probably find it quite easily, yeah.
Yeah, God forbid it comes up with my Tumblr account. Based on that search, maybe don't do that. Look through my Marketing Brew archives. But anyways, yeah, that I think is part of why Tumblr re-entered the conversation.
The return to authenticity keeps coming up in these podcast discussions, which is like so delicious to me, because when I first got into this, it was all about being authentic online and sharing just because you have something to say and you want to put something out there. And it was never about making money. I was actually saying this on Twitter yesterday, and I feel like there's this real kind of yearning to get back to that. And we lost something when all content became highly curated and there was this money-making desire behind having the platform in the first place versus having a platform because you have something great to say or some kind of art to put out there or whatever it is, and then to have the money making follow that. I think that kind of cadence like really ties into level of authenticity, and I'm personally glad to see us coming back a little bit to more authentic platforms.
Yeah, I'm glad to see Meta having competitors, if that makes sense. I mean, I think that authenticity is really like an overused word in this industry because it's kind of what makes influencer marketing valuable. Sum it up in one common piece of jargon. So I understand why it's overused, but you know, I also think that there's a lot more value in influencer marketing than exclusively authenticity, right?
For sure. I mean,
but I'm mostly, go ahead.
I was going to say, like, it's funny. My husband somehow started following this lady on Instagram. She's like a mom with like a bunch of sons in North Carolina. And he's like a much more fashion forward than I am. Like, she posts her outfits and it's all about shopping her outfits. And he's always like, look at this one. This is great. This would look good on you. And it's very highly curated. Like, the room always looks perfect and her outfit looks great and her hair is perfect. And like, actually the outfits do look terrific. And I was clicking through to Nordstrom from her feed yesterday. So yeah, there's a place for that more curated lifestyle and platform online too. But
yeah,
I don't know. I just miss people being real.
Yeah. And I mean, the realest honestly was Facebook, right? That was when people were the most real, was when it was just, you know, Facebook came about when I was like in high school, college.
I got to show you some of the mom blogs from 2005.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
Real.
Would love to see it. Yeah. But that was the most real, right? It was kind of like your family photo album or your friends from college photo album or whatever on there. But then Instagram came about, and I frankly really miss the early days of Instagram. Like, it was, you know, even having those filters. Like, I remember getting an Instagram for the first time and being like, wow, like, look at all the things that I can do to my pictures.
Yeah, like the white
so cool.
and like the white frame around it.
Yes,
and like making the picture look like super 70s.
Yeah, but I liked that it was artsy, right? Like, I liked that it was sort of that they were playing to like this hipster demographic. And now it's really mainstream. And obviously that's what makes people money, influencers money, and the platforms money. But I'm like, I wish when I could post a grid photo of a coffee rather than like an Instagram story of a coffee, right? Because I don't necessarily want that to go away. I understand why Instagram copied Snapchat stories in that way, but yeah, I thought the platform was more unique and frankly authentic. Even if it's like, it was just a different kind of authenticity, right? Like, obviously if I'm posting a perfectly curated photo of my coffee, like, that's not authentic, but like, I am drinking coffee rather than like posing with my friends at their wedding, and that's every single Instagram picture I post, right?
Well, and I think there was more community then too. That's one of the things I like so much about Be Real, is it kind of reminds me of those early Instagram days where the only people on there with me are people I actually know, and we're chatting with each other and connecting in the comments. I mean, that's kind of gone away from Instagram. Like, it started off being just people I knew personally and friends, and them seeing what you're up to and having that real life connection and community. And now it's become something very different.
Very different indeed.
So what would you say is your favorite article you've written in the past year? Like, what
in the past year
surprised you the most, or was the most just kind of delightful to write about, or from whatever angle you want to kind of answer that? But what was your favorite?
It's a really good question. So I feel like having a beat as a journalist is kind of like unspooling a ball of yarn. And so it's like basically a series of articles that, you know, would be my favorites. But once I realized that I was, you know, doubling down on this influencer marketing beat, obviously just going and talking to, you know, influencer professionals, I realized that one of the biggest issues facing the industry is how people are paid, right? There is truly barely any standardization. At least when I started covering it, there was like almost none. And there were these platforms that were popping up, Clara and FYPM, and now these platforms have grown a lot, but they're essentially like Glassdoor for influencers. So influencers can go on them and, you see like, okay, say that I'm doing a influencer campaign for PetSmart. I could go on there and see 10 other influencers that had reviewed PetSmart and see how many followers they have, what their engagement rate is like, and then what PetSmart paid them per whatever unit of posts they did. And so it's sort of like started to level the playing field for how influencers are paid, and which, for marketers, like there needs to be some sort of standardization in order for this to become like the channel that it has the potential to be, right? In order for it to become something like TV or out of home or whatever. And we're getting there, but this payment stuff is really important. And so in the midst of reporting on a lot of different stories about those platforms and, fair and equal pay, all of that stuff, there were a lot of discussions about folks being paid equally, right? And like bias and discrimination in terms of how these people are paid. White female influencers make more on average than Black female influencers. That's not okay. A recent study had come about like that, even though there are so many more female identifying influencers than male identifying influencers. Men are still getting paid on average per post far more than women are.
I actually think that's the reason, because it makes us crazy that men demand higher payment as influencers, but we, as someone who pays influencers, we often end up in a situation where there's not much that we can do to rectify it, even when we see that issue, because there is a smaller pool of them, especially when you're working with a lifestyle brand, and it's a scarcity thing. It's supply and demand. This doesn't answer the white women getting paid more than Black women, because that rule should make it that Black women get paid more. But in the male and female one, what we see is that there are so few men who are doing sponsored content, especially on Instagram, that they are demanding more money because they know you can't find someone else.
And also it's feminized labor, so it's valued less, right? And if they know that, then they're smart to demand more money because the work should be valued more. But anyhow, that's another discussion. But the story that, the story that I'd been excited about writing while we were all realizing these, equal payment issues, we were all talking about equal pay a lot when I wrote this story, right? In terms of gender, race, etc. But people that were being left out of the conversation of being paid equally were children. There are mommy bloggers and children of influencers who are in so much content. Think of, the children that open toys for a living and review them on YouTube, who are all of 7 years old. Those people are really not being paid equally, if at all, right? And with Jeanette McCurdy's new memoir that came out, it's honestly kind of relevant again, because the only real rules around child labor in terms of this like talent industry are, in California, you have to have something called a Coogan account if you are a child actor or model or whatever. And it takes a percentage of this child actor or model or whatever's income and puts it away in this account for the child to access it when they are 18. Apparently, Jeanette McCurdy, there was something that went wrong with her Coogan account. So she didn't see any money from acting all those years on, when she was younger, according to her in this memoir. But anywho, so I wrote the story about why children and kidfluencers are being left out of the equal pay conversation. And I ended up talking to a lot of different parents who have their kids in content, and they all have different approaches of how they pay their children, right? If at all. So some of them, were kind of newer to the game and we're like, oh, that hasn't even really occurred to me. We're trying to do this to keep up our family's income and make sure that we can all have good lives and stuff. Others have been doing this for a long time and had savings accounts for each of their children that they'd put a percentage of the money into themselves from these influencer deals. Others had recently raised their rates. So they have one rate if it's just the adult in the content. They have a higher rate if the children are in the content. But there's truly no standardization. It's like a child labor issue. It's an equal pay issue. And I don't think that a lot of people had really explored it before at the time. So the fact that kidfluencers and child influencers are being left out of the equal pay conversation is one of the articles that was more interesting to write for my own purposes in the past year or so.
It's such a juicy topic. I mean, we did a program a few years ago that used all kids, and we had 4-year-olds, and we were flying them across the country with their families. And first of all, it's so much more work because you can't just deal with the influencer. They have a whole posse with them because they're 4 and need care. But there was a mini documentary on CBS kind of profiling 3 families with kid influencers. And to your point, it was so crazy to see the disparities. I mean, one of the families, they were not saving any of the money for their kids. It was all going to improvements towards their house and just kind of the family lifestyle, but nothing was going to the kids at all.
Yeah. And it's is that okay or is that not okay? Child labor laws in the US, I think, dictate it's not, but this isn't totally viewed as labor yet. yet it is, right? Many people have full-time jobs influencing.
Yeah, crazy. Okay, so this has been so much fun. I could like talk to you forever and like go off on 100 tangents, but I know we don't have all day. But one of the things we do on this podcast is we close every podcast by asking our guests to tell us what their favorite commercial was as a kid. What commercial kind of has stuck with you since your childhood?
Oh my goodness. I mean, I barely watch TV, and when I did, it was definitely just like infomercial.
Oh, that's right. This is the hard question for you. When you were at your friend's house watching their TV.
Yeah, exactly. There was one about, it was Education Connection. We were actually talking about this in my Marketing Brew Slack channel recently about local commercials that like every kid in, some local area remembered, and it was a jingle that you remembered and sang it to. But there was a commercial for something called Education Connection, and it had a fun jingle, and it was this cool hip girl, like it was like a Nick at Night buy, and all I remember from it is that the beat was like Education Connection. But yeah, the jingles were very important to children, and we all sang this one in my county of Virginia and where the school was. Also, I was brought up during the Snuggie infomercials and commercials, and
oh my goodness,
if there was ever a piece of advertising that like can really say, okay, this works, like you can build an industry off of this, it was Snuggies. Who else would have purchased or known about a Snuggie if not for the Snuggie commercials? And I remember you could go to the As Seen on TV store in the mall, which is like, that's a whole other story that somebody could tell, and buy a Snuggie. And I had like a micro plush one, and I remember I would see, it was like kind of like a luxe Snuggie, very fancy. And I remember I'd look at the commercial, and like on the commercial they have these people in fleece Snuggies, and I was like, oof, they're doing it wrong, like they need the deluxe Snuggie. So yeah, it was a lot of infomercials. Like I don't remember, I feel like today traditionally, like you watch the Super Bowl and you see commercials, and they're these like heavily produced spots, and they're out somewhere on a beautiful landscape driving a car, and there is lighting and cameras. I think that every single commercial I saw as a child was like filmed in a white box in some studio somewhere. Like I don't remember seeing commercials.
It's so interesting. Like the generational difference of this question has been super, super fun. Kids of the 90s or kids of the 2000s. And then like myself growing up, like just glued to Saturday morning cartoons in the 70s. And it was like all commercials all the time. And I don't know, if I pose this question to my kids, I guess I don't think they'd have an answer for me at all, because commercials aren't.
Yeah, well, it's funny because that is what the public speaks about, that commercials aren't a thing. But being that, I mean, when I first started Marketing Brew, I had to report on every single aspect of the marketing industry because it was just me. So I was like, all right, I got to be up on the TV commercials. So I bought all of the streaming services and got all of them with ads. And it's funny because my partner is like, why do we need to have ads? We can pay the $10 more, not have ads. And I was like, it's for my career.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining me. This was awesome. And if people want to follow you, we will not tell them how to find your Tumblr, but if they want to find you on Twitter, you are at not Phoebe, and they can find you there.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. This has been awesome.
Thank you so much. This was great.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Please check back next Monday for a new episode featuring marketing conversations through the lens of influence. I am your host, Danielle Wiley, and this is The Art of Sway.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Keith Smith hosts a great podcast called The Fuel Podcast. Keith, tell us what these fine folks will get out of listening.
Fuel is all about the advertising business. It's like Mad Men for the ears. Every show, I pick on a hot topic to discuss or interview a celebrity from the world of British and American advertising. We chat about all sorts of things, and I try and uncover the real person behind the image using just my powerful charm, incisive wit, and incredible humility.
Awesome. Where can people subscribe?
Wherever they normally get their podcasts, from Apple, Google, Spotify, the MPN website, or just visit my website at thefuelpodcast.com.
You heard him. Go subscribe. This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.